Hello everybody, it's Vertical Sandwich. Welcome back to Book Reviews. Alright, so what we're going to be starting now is going to be kind of exhausting. It's a lot. And we're going to try to work our way up to, we're going to tackle Isaac Asimov's The Foundation series. And that comes with some qualifiers because there's a core Foundation series. The first three books, which are Foundation, Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation. These three books. And those books were written in the 50s. And they're like the original Isaac Asimov, like, trilogy of Foundation books. And then in the 80s, Isaac Asimov revisited this idea and wrote 2 prequels and 2 sequels. So, making the original trilogy, books 3, 4, and 5 of the series. And I haven't read the 2 prequels because of the way I kind of feel about the sequels. But book 6 in the series of 7, the first book he wrote, the book that is the book that directly follows the conclusion of the original series, won the Hugo Award. Now the original series in the 50s actually won Best Series Hugo Award in, I think, 1966. I can check. 1966. So, let's start. These reviews will probably be a little briefer than my reviews would normally be because we're just going to we're trying to get through the series and doing an overview. And I will talk about them distinctly, right? So there's there's the original core trilogy that we'll talk about differently than we talk about the work in the 80s. And the reason is because they're very different. They're distinctly different. And I don't know much about the prequels because I haven't read them, and I'm just going to ignore kind of their existence. So for the purposes of the review of the first 3 books, we're just going to talk about them as a trilogy. So, we'll talk about them individually. They're each going to be a book review, and I'll just do these 5 days in a row. So the first book is Foundation. So let's talk about the premise of the Foundation series. The first book is Foundation. It was published in 1951, and most of it was stuff that was written in the 40s for Astounding Science Fiction that Asimov compiled into a novel and wrote like one more part to kind of tie it together. And it was originally entitled like the 1,000-Year Plan or something. Now, here's the idea. There's a guy. His name is Harry Seldon, and he comes up with he has invented a science called psychohistory. And the idea, for 12,000 years, the Galactic Empire has ruled supreme. Now it was dying. But only Harry Seldon, creator of the revolutionary science of psychohistory, could see into the future. A dark age of ignorance, barbarism, and warfare that would last 30,000 years. To preserve knowledge and save mankind, Seldon gathered the best minds in the Empire, both scientists and scholars, and brought them to a bleak planet at the edge of the galaxy to serve as a beacon of hope for future generations. He called his sanctuary the Foundation. But soon the fledgling Foundation found itself at the mercy of corrupt warlords rising in the wake of the receding empire. Mankind's last best hope was faced with an agonizing choice: submit to the barbarians and be overrun, or fight them and be destroyed. So, here's the way it works. This guy comes up with psychohistory and starts saying that the Galactic Empire is going to collapse. And the leaders of the Galactic Empire pull him up and say, that's treason. And he's saying, no, I'm not saying it should. I'm saying it will. So why don't you here's what I would like to do. Let me go to the edge of the galaxy, find a little planet where I won't even bother you, nobody cares about it. And let me kind of create a knowledge base of everything we know to the best I can, because when my psychohistory predicts that when the Empire collapses, that there'll be a dark age that lasts 30,000 years. But I think by working on this foundation and preserving our knowledge, I can shorten that time to 1,000 years. And they go, yeah, okay, whatever, just get out of our hair. And they send him off, and this group starts making this encyclopedia. Fine. Then the Galactic Empire collapses. And now you have a story. And so he's started this foundation. It's in this little planet that, like I said, nobody cares about, way out in the boonies of the Galactic Empire. And these people, his science can predict the future across the society. It doesn't predict individual actions of individuals, and that's important. So it can't tell that, like, this king on this planet is going to blah, blah, blah. But over hundreds of years, humans follow a predictable pattern, and that's what psychohistory does. So Harry Seldon's foundation, he before he dies, he makes a series of messages so that what happens is when these foundations meet crises, like they're attacked by somebody or they're threatened by somebody, once that crisis is resolved, there's this chamber and he'll appear and say, oh, I see you've solved this by blah, 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 so that they can know that they're on the Seldon plan. Because if things start diverging from the Seldon plan, then they're not shortening this dark age. But the only way that they can know whether or not they're on the Seldon plan is if these messages recorded in the past play for them. So these things happen, and they find quirky ways to solve these crises, and then this chamber and like Seldon appears and he goes, oh, I see that you figured out that you had to do A, B, and C. And they go, oh, that's exactly what we did. Cool, we're still on the plan. It's a great idea, right? That the idea that that somebody predicts this kind of disaster, and then this group is trying to, shorten the dark age of an empire before reestablishing a different empire. So, let's read a little bit. Terminus. Its location, see map, was an odd one for the role it was called upon to play in galactic history, and yet, as many writers have never tired of pointing out, an inevitable one. Located on the very fringe of the galactic spiral, an only planet of an isolated sun, poor in resources and negligible in economic value. It was never settled in the 5 years after its discovery, until the landing of the encyclopedists. It was inevitable that as a new generation grew, Terminus would become something more than an appendage of the psychohistorians of Trantor. Trantor is the center of the galactic empire. With an Anachronian revolt and the rise to power of Salvor Hardin, first of the great line of, and that's from the Encyclopedia Galactica, which is the book, the source of knowledge that the people are putting together. Louis Perrine was busily engaged at his desk in the one well-lit corner of the room. Work had to be coordinated, effort had to be organized, threads had to be woven into a pattern. 50 years now, 50 years to establish themselves and set up Encyclopedia Foundation number 1 into a smoothly working unit. 50 years to gather the raw material, 50 years to prepare. It had been done. 5 more years would see the publication of the first volume of the most monumental work the galaxy had ever conceived, and then at 10-year intervals, regularly, like clockwork, volume after volume. And with them, there would be supplements, special articles on events of current interest until Perrine stirred uneasily as the muted buzzer upon his desk muttered peevishly. He had almost forgotten the appointment. He shoved the door release, and out of an abstracted corner of one eye, saw the door open and the broad figure of Salvor Hardin enter. Perrine did not look up. Hardin smiled to himself. He was in a hurry, but he knew better than to take offense at Perrine's cavalier treatment of anything or anyone that disturbed him at his work. He buried himself in the chair on the other side of the desk and waited. Perrine's stylus made the faintest scraping sound as it raced across paper, otherwise neither motion nor sound, and then Hardin withdrew a 2-credit coin from his vest pocket. He flipped it, and its stainless steel surface caught flitters of light as it tumbled through the air. He caught it and flipped it again, watching the flashing reflections lazily. Stainless steel made good medium of exchange on a planet where all metal had to be imported. Perrine looked up and blinked. "Stop that!" he said querulously. "Eh? That infernal coin-tossing! Stop it!" Oh, Hardin pocketed the metal disc. "Tell me when you're ready, will you? I promised to be back at the city council meeting before the new aqueduct project is put to a vote." Perrine sighed and shoved himself away from the desk. "I'm ready, but I hope you aren't going to bother me with city affairs. Take care of that yourself, please. The encyclopedia takes up all my time." "Have you heard the news?" questioned Hardin, phlegmatically. "What news?" "The news that the Terminus City Ultrawave set received 2 hours ago. The royal governor of the prefect of Anacreon has assumed the title of king." "Well, what of it?" "It means," responded Hardin, "that we're cut off from the inner regions of the empire. We've been expecting it, but that doesn't make it any more comfortable. Anacreon stands square across what was our last remaining trade route to Santani and to Trantor and to Vega itself. Where is our metal to come from? We haven't managed to get a steel or aluminum shipment through in 6 months. And now we won't be able to get any at all, except by grace of the king of Anacreon. Okay, so, yeah, it's a lot of this, right? It's a lot of the idea that people hold power in kind of these governments, and this little tiny community full of scientists have to find ways to, like, trick their ways around, kind of interplanetary politics, and stuff like that, and it's brilliant. Like, the first 3 books of the Foundation series, and I'm going to say this again and again as I talk about them, they're genius. They're Asimov at his best. They're absolutely just great science fiction. They're clever, they're relatable, they're easy to read, they're fast-paced. This one's only... Does this not have page numbers? Yeah. This was 300 pages and it'll fly by. It's just everything about it is really clever, about the way, like, these people think about things and the way that they, like, work their way through these problems, because they're scientists and encyclopedists, and they can't stand up against, like, a space armada. So, yeah, Foundation, classic. The trilogy, obviously, like I said, best sci-fi trilogy in 1966. But some of the, like, this is the thing where you read those early Hugo Award winners, and I'm like, yeah, they're crap sci-fi. And this was written, well before the Hugo Award was established, and these things were written in the 40s and collected in the 50s to be published in the 50s, and they're brilliant early sci-fi. Brilliant. Just way ahead of its time, just written in, just, you understand why Asimov is like a name that became a monument to science fiction when you read the Foundation series, and how brilliantly they're put together, and how clever they are, and inherently readable, and how much you like the characters, and you like the events, and stuff is just cool, and you don't see the stuff coming that happens. Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. So, that's it, 1951, Isaac Asimov's Foundation, the first book in the Foundation series, chronologically written first book. When we come back, we will be talking about Foundation and Empire, the second book. Bye, everybody.